Welcome to the Wave Strength. Innovative pension solutions for a secure retirement. Presented by Pacific Life.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us on another exciting episode of the Wave Strength podcast. I'm your host, Jim Breen, a marketing director with Pacific Life's institutional division. And with us today is Paul Hance. Paul is the senior vice president of the institutional division's Customer Solutions Group. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's great to have you on the episode.
It's great to be here, Jim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Paul. Paul, maybe you can share with our listeners a little bit about your background and help us to understand a little more about your history in the financial industry.
Sure, Jim. Yeah, so I've been in the financial industry over 15 years. Worked for a number of companies. Joined Pacific Life about a bit over 2 years ago. Really attracted by the exciting story around the growth of the institutional division, and just that opportunity to kind of help build out the culture of the new division. And then one key element I think we're going to talk about here shortly is around customer-centric innovation. Absolutely.
Customer-centric innovation. I listened to you speaking about this just a few days ago, and it was inspiring, to listen to not just your philosophy on your leadership style and your current role, but to hear how that grew over the course of your career. And I think we'll get into directive versus facilitative leadership here in a moment, I'm sure. But, it's very interesting to see how you have really leaned into some of these areas that might otherwise be uncomfortable for some, or maybe even for you at times, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great opportunity to talk with the officers of Pacific Life on Monday. I think we have obviously a great story to tell as it relates to the institutional division in terms of our numbers and our metrics and our growth well ahead of schedule, relative to our original aspirational plans. But rather than go into the details in terms of this product or this solution or this modernization of this administrative platform, I really wanted to focus more on the how, because I think about it as it's 20% strategy and 80% execution. So I wanted to focus on the execution, which is really the hard part. We had the right strategy, but we had to have the right execution to be successful.
And I want to hear more about those successes here in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about kind of the basis for these strategies. So it's Pacific Life. A few years back, they created a system for innovation called the 5Ds, and you discussed the third D, which is demonstrate, agility, innovation, and decision making, and that was kind of the basis of that presentation you made. And maybe you could share a little bit about why that third D is important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the third D around agility, innovation, and decision-making, we face a similar challenge as a lot of other insurance companies. Insurance, it's very critical. We've been around for 150 years, and we need to be around for another 150 years. So it's very, very critical that we do everything we can to make sure that we have that stability and can keep those promises to our customers for the next 150 years. So that's critical. But we also have to balance that with, we need to add value to our customers by innovating, by creating new solutions, by modernizing. And sometimes those two things can cause some tension sometimes between, whether we need to get to absolute perfection on everything, balancing that with innovation and agility in decision-making.
I heard you mention an example in your presentation. Sometimes it's better that you have 5 things that are great and one that's so-so, as opposed to having one perfect item, because you're never going to gain perfection. It's impossible to be perfect. And better to have those 5 items go out with that one so-so and learn from the mistakes, if any, that those 5 or the so-so version of that product or marketing piece, whatever it may be, yielded. And it was inspiring to hear you talk about that. And I think it wasn't something that it sounds like you thought of overnight. It sounds like maybe through experience and your years of experience, this is something you've learned over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think I mentioned in prior podcasts, I'm an actuary by background. So I've been all the way up to being a chief actuary of a public company. And as some of you know, actuarial science, like any professional function, there's a lot you need to learn that's very technical and very specific to that profession. But one of the things in my role as a senior leader is that I need to be able to lead a cross-functional team. I can't know everything about every function. I need to rely on that team of experts. And as someone that came from a more technical background, that can be very scary in a lot of ways, because as I moved up the ranks, and as many move up the ranks from a professional perspective, you go from the entry level where everything's new, you're learning, you're drinking from a fire hose, to now you're managing a team of doers where you're becoming more and more of an expert, to okay, now I'm the senior most actuary in a company. I'm in front of the board. I'm the one with the final answer on this particular topic. I'm the expert. To okay, now I'm the leader of a business. I don't know marketing. I don't know operations. I don't know technology. I can learn a little bit and dabble a little bit, but that's not the most effective way to lead the team.
Mm-hmm.
The most effective way to lead the team is to empower them, set the right strategy, make sure we have the right alignment between the various areas and the right collaboration, but let the team figure out the best solution,
Mm-hmm.
and not try to feel like I need to have the answer myself, which I think it's just a big transition for a leader to be able to get comfortable with not knowing the answers, but relying on the team to figure out what makes the most sense.
And it can be scary, right? As I mentioned earlier, to be able to lean into that, to be comfortable with that risk, especially as a leader, where and it may not stem from you wanting everything to be perfect, but a leader not wanting their folks to make a mistake or to have to go through some of those pain points associated with doing something wrong. But boy, so much to learn when you make that mistake, and if you learn from that mistake, right? There's so much that can be learned from that opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's oftentimes with the best of intentions that
Mhm.
leaders want to protect their team from making mistakes. But oftentimes that's the way that people learn. Like I know you have 4 kids, Jim.
Yep.
I have 2, and it's tough to let them make mistakes. It's really tough. But those are some of the ways, as I think about my childhood, those are some of the ways you learn the most, is when you are granted that independence to try things in with the right guardrails,
Yeah.
but with wide guardrails. When you're given that independence to try things, you make mistakes and you learn, and that's sometimes the way that you learn the best. And ultimately, that leads to the team to be able to be the most productive. And that's one of the keys, as it comes back to the customer-centric innovation. To be able to do that, we need to have a large number of agile teams, because we can't just all work on one thing. We need to have teams that are able to focus on these things independently, and we need to trust them and rely on them, and that they have to be able to figure out things on their own ultimately.
Mhm. Yeah, the wide guardrails, as you say, set up those boundaries, make sure they're not going to just fly over the cliff, but encourage them to explore the width of the road.
Mhm.
And I think I've heard you mention this before, Paul, which I appreciate, in that, it's when you are able to be comfortable as a leader and provide that safe environment to try something new, that empowerment,
Mhm.
it's contagious, right? And your team then learns how to be more effective and have more organizational efficiency, perhaps, in that environment with those wider guardrails. And it truly, it really is important when the leadership can be in lockstep with that approach, so that the team members can feel comfortable and confident working in that innovative environment.
Absolutely. And that comes back to the customer-centric innovation. It's
Mhm.
easy to say focus on the customer, but we need to empower our team members that are engaging with our customers. We need to empower them to be creative, to be thoughtful, to be able to think through, in partnership with our customers, be able to think through and iterate and innovate.
Mhm.
And that really requires a lot of empowerment for our customer-facing partners. And it also requires that culturally our entire team needs to have that customer-centric mindset.
Yeah, and especially as we're looking and tackling, defined contribution lifetime income, as we look at the participant through that lens of a hearts and minds approach,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it helps us as an insurance the industry, the financial industry, where so many of the products and things that the participants, the end user, sees are somewhat complicated often.
Mhm.
What an opportunity for us to build, to develop to provide education, as we've talked about before, a deeper opportunity for those folks to connect.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's so critical. And as we do that, it's important that we try things, right? Because we can't sit here in a room and come up with the perfect communication strategy, the perfect product, the perfect solution. We need to engage with our customers and let's try something. Let's hear the feedback, let's hear the challenges, and let's throw something against the wall. Get that real live customer feedback of, is this resonating? Is it not? And what is resonating and what's not resonating? And that's really been a big focus of our strategy in the defined contribution lifetime income spaces, is not to focus on building product X or product Y or product Z. It's first to understand the stakeholders in the ecosystem, whether it's the record keepers, whether it's the consultants, the asset managers, the plan sponsors, the participants. Engage with all of those various stakeholders and understand their challenges and understand what hasn't worked in the past, and then partner with them, engage with them directly, and get that live feedback of, hey, if we were to build X, how would that work? What's good about that? What's not good about that? And focusing on getting that feedback along the way will ultimately get us to a much better outcome. Because it's easy to build something we think people will solve this problem. It's hard to build something that will really solve the problem, which is our focus.
And this has been great, Paul, but let's switch gears here. We talked a lot about what we've been doing with that innovation and your philosophy towards customer-centric innovation. What are some of the fruits that you have seen as a result of this leadership style? In your 2 years here within Pacific Life, over 2 years now, what are some of the successes that we've been able to have as a result of that leadership style?
Sure, yeah. So I would say the first biggest success is really just our ability to do a lot more with the team members we have. And I think one of the very early changes we've tried to implement culturally is not, when questions come from the team, is not give them the answer, right? This is around facilitated versus directive leadership, right? We want to facilitate the team members coming to the right answer. And that means that it's easy to give that answer, but over time, they've been able to learn more and more and felt more empowered to just make decisions on their own. And ultimately, that leads us to have a lot more capacity. So that's led to, new product lines, as an example, new product features, substantial growth overall. So we had very aspirational goals with our new division to triple income and double assets under management in 5 years. That was very aspirational.
Yes.
Insurance companies don't typically grow at those sort of paces. And we're really pleased that we're actually well ahead of schedule on that. And it's because of our focus on the customer, and it's because of our ability to empower the team members to just go off and solve those problems and feel the empowerment to do so.
That's great, Paul. And what a great testament to true innovation and a leadership style that really promotes that opportunity to bring a new sense of innovation to a very interesting part of the market. I want to thank you, Paul, for being with us and joining us on another episode here. Really grateful for your time. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. I want to encourage you to head over to YouTube, Spotify, or Audible. Search the Wave Strength to see more thought leadership content. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the content as well. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
This has been another episode of The Wave Strength, presented by Pacific Life. Don't forget to catch us on YouTube and make sure to subscribe. Although this podcast is presented by Pacific Life, the opinions and views expressed are those of the hosts and participants and do not necessarily reflect Pacific Life's views on any of the topics discussed. Pacific Life is a product provider. It is not a fiduciary and therefore does not give advice or make recommendations regarding insurance or investment products. Pacific Life, its affiliates, its distributors, and respective representatives do not provide any employer-sponsored qualified plan administrative services or impartial advice about investments, and do not act in a fiduciary capacity for any plan. Pacific Life refers to Pacific Life Insurance Company, Newport Beach, California, and its affiliates, including Pacific Life and Annuity Company. Insurance products are issued by Pacific Life Insurance Company in all states except New York, and in New York by Pacific Life and Annuity Company. Product availability and features may vary by state. Each insurance company is solely responsible for the financial obligations accruing under the products it issues. This podcast was recorded on June 9th, 2022.